السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. Chapter 7, Good News and Bad News for David. Part 2. There was a moment's silence. Then Dora said, "You didn't seem to care for that happiness earlier in the day when you were sitting with the lady in pink, but I expect you don't mean what you say. And of course, you are quite free to do whatever you like." I don't know how I did it. It happened so quickly. Suddenly, I had Dora in my arms and I couldn't stop speaking. I told her how I loved her. I told her I would die. I told her I would die without her. And when she blushed and cried a little, I said I had loved her day and night since the moment I had first seen her. I told her that nobody had ever loved or could ever love as much as I loved her. Somehow I found myself sitting quietly next to Dora on the sofa, holding her little hand. We were engaged. I suppose we realized that one day we would get married, but for the moment we were going to keep our engagement secret from Mr. Spinlow. When Miss Mills came in, she was delighted to hear our news and promised to help us as much as possible. Now began one of the happiest times of my life. When I look back, I see how foolish I was, but how loving and sincere. I visited Dora every day, and I did not have time for anyone or anything else. But in the middle of my excitement, I suddenly thought of Agnes, of her clear, calm eyes and her gentle face, and I sat down immediately to write to her and tell her all about Dora. I knew that as my adopted sister, she would share my happiness and I wanted her approval. One day, when Peggy and I were having tea in my flat, Tommy Traddles came to visit me. "My dear Copperfield," he cried, "I have been several times before, but you have been out." "My dear Traddles," I replied, "yes, I am very sorry. I have been visiting my Miss D, you know." Okay. "I expect she lives in London, doesn't she?" "Mine, that's Sophie. Beautiful name, isn't it?" "Mine lives in Devon." "I think I told you. So I don't see her very often. She really is the dearest girl. She is very busy at home, you know, looking after the other nice children and her mother, who is unable to walk. What a wonderful girl she must be. يا لها من بنت رائعة. تمام. I agreed politely. And tell me, Traddles, how is Mr. Micawber?" "I am not living in his house at the moment," said Traddles, "because his creditors demanded payment of his debts recently, and he had to move to another house to avoid these unpleasant men. He has even changed his name to Mortimer, and he only comes out of the house after dark wearing glasses. So nothing has turned up for him yet." "And what about the money you lent him, Traddles?" طبعا ترادلز هنا كان زي ما احنا عارفين he lent money to David. اوكي. فترادلز قال له I'm afraid I may not get it back. مش هجيبها خلاص. ربما لن أحصل عليها يعني. But Mr. Micawber promises to give it back one day. He is a fine, honest man, isn't he? And Traddles looked hopefully at me. Before I could reply, we heard footsteps on the stairs. I was very surprised to see my aunt coming upstairs. She was carrying two cases in her cat, and was followed closely by Mr. Dick carrying two more cases. طبعا ايه زي ما احنا شايفين ايه عمة ديفيد كوبرفيلد جت تشوفه يعني طبعا في مشكلة هنا هنكتشف بعد كده. My dear aunt, I cried, what unexpected pleasure. We kissed each other, and I shook hands with Mr. Dick. Traddles left quietly, as he could see we would be discussing family matters. Peggotty made some tea for my aunt, who had sat down heavily on her cases. Dear aunt, I said, make yourself more comfortable. Sit in an armchair or sit on the sofa. Why do you think I am sitting on my cases? She asked, looking seriously at me. Okay. I shook my head, unable to guess. Because I am sitting on is all I have. Because what I am sitting on is all I have. هنا كومنت مهم جدا يعني. طبعا مس بيتسي تروتوود هي اللي بتقول الكلام ده. ديفيدز انت يعني بتقوله لمين؟ بتقوله لديفيد يعني. Because what I am sitting on is all I have. Because I have lost all my money, my dear. I couldn't have been more shocked if the house and all of us in it had fallen into the river Thames. Yes, continued my aunt, putting her head calmly on my shoulder. I'll tell you all about it tomorrow, David. But tonight we must find a bed for Mr. Dick, and I'll sleep here to save money. So that night my aunt agreed to take my bed, while I planned to sleep on the sitting room sofa. And I took Mr. Dick to a neighbor's house to rent a room. When I returned, I found my aunt walking up and down in front of the sitting room fire. That Peggotty woman is very fond of you, David, she said. She has been offering to give us some of her money, the money she inherited from her husband. Of course, I refused at once, but she is a good woman, and she has been telling me about the trouble at Yarmouth. Yes, poor Emily, I could not stop myself saying. Silly Emily, you mean. But I am sorry for you because you cared for her once. And now Peggotty tells me you are in love again. I blushed. I love Dora with all my heart, aunt. I suppose the little thing is very lovely, is she? No one can imagine how lovely she is. She isn't at all silly, is she? Asked my aunt. I had never considered this possibility before, and could only repeat what my aunt had said. Silly? Aunt? Well, I only ask, replied my aunt gently. David, you're very loving, like your poor mother, and you need a good, serious, sensible person to love. Aunt, if you only knew how sensible Dora is, I replied. Oh, David, she answered. Blind. This made me feel a little uncomfortable, but I was glad she knew my secret. I thought perhaps she was rather tired, so I said good night. She went to my bedroom and I lay down on the sofa. How miserable I was that night. I knew I should be thinking of my poor aunt's situation, but I could not prevent myself from thinking of Dora. How could I marry her if I had no money, no expensive clothes to wear, no handsome white horse to ride, or flowers to give her? The next morning I got up early to have a walk in the fresh air, and on the way home a carriage stopped beside me and Agnes Wakefield got out. I immediately felt better when I saw her beautiful, calm face smiling at me. She had heard that my aunt was in trouble and had come to London to see her. We walked together to my flat. You know that Uriah Heep is my father's partner now, she said quietly. طبعا هنا مين اللي بيتكلم زي ما احنا عارفين؟ أجنس. تمام. Miss Agnes Wakefield. His influence over my father is far too great. Father is much, much worse. He looks years older, and I am afraid that encouraged by Uriah, he drinks more than ever. Uriah and his older mother live with us now, so I can't always be with father too. To protect him from whatever Uriah is planning, I just hope that love and truth will always be stronger than evil. I could not give her my opinion of Uriah, because by then we had arrived at the flat. My aunt was very pleased to see Agnes again, and made us sit on the sofa next to Bigotti. Now let me explain to you all what happened to my money, said my aunt firmly. I was surprised to see that Agnes was pale and trembling. Betsy Trotwood continued, I saved a lot of money over the years, and my lawyer, Mr. Wakefield, used to help me invest it in the right companies. But recently I thought he wasn't such a good lawyer, and as he used to be. So I decided to invest my money myself. What a lot of mistakes I made. Who knows where it's gone? In gold and foreign banks and so on. It's no good worrying about it, but I can tell you there is nothing left. The color was beginning to return to Agnes's face, so it wasn't my father's fault, dear Miss Trotwood? Not at all, Agnes, said my aunt cheerfully. Now, can any of you give me some advice? I have asked my servant Janet to rent my little house in Kent. That will bring in about £70 a year. I think we will need more than that to live on. You and David could share this flat very cheaply with Mr. Dick, thing just around the corner in his rented room, suggested Agnes. And I think I can find a little job for David. Do you remember Dr. Strong, the headmaster of the Canterbury School? Now that he is retired and come to live in London, he needs a private secretary. He needs a private secretary to work for him in mornings and evenings at his house. He was asking father about it the other day. What do you think? Agnes, I cried, what would we do without you? You are my good angel. I told you so before. I could easily be Dr. Strong's secretary, as well as continuing my work in Mr. Spinlow's firm. I'll go and see him today and arrange it with him. Agnes gave me her beautiful smile as she got up to leave. I went downstairs with her, and as we walked together to the coach station, I saw an old beggar with a white stick in the street. He was holding out his thin hand for money and crying, blind, blind, blind. It sounded like an echo of what my aunt had said the day before. Oh, Agnes, dear sister, if I had only known then what I discovered long afterwards. The end of chapter 7. Thank you for listening.